Das sir,
Yeah.
shall we start it?
Yeah. Should I start my presentation?
I will make an introduction, sir.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the webinar series of Kerala State Council for Science, Technology and Environment. And today is a special day for students. September 5th, the birthday of Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, the former president of India and a great teacher. In India, since 1962 onwards, this day is being celebrated as National Teachers' Day. And now UNESCO also is doing it. According to Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, teachers should be the best minds in the country. The teachers are molding the future of the nation through their students. And today's topic is nurturing creativity, the role of a teacher. A great teacher inspires the students. Today, we have with us a great scientist and a teacher, Dr. Suresh Das, former Executive Vice President of KSCSTE and former Director of National Institute of Interdisciplinary Science and Technology, and presently Emeritus Professor in the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Thiruvananthapuram. On behalf of all the participants in this webinar, I welcome Dr. Suresh Das for this program. And
Thank you.
Arjun Prasad, scientist, KSCSTE, to formally introduce the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil sir. Good morning, everyone. So it's a really wonderful day to have a webinar, especially on a Teachers' Day. And we have the right person here, Dr. Suresh Das, and he was the former Executive Vice President of Kerala State Council for Science, Technology and Environment. And before that, he was the Director of the IISER National Institute for Interdisciplinary Science and Technology, Thiruvananthapuram. Dr. Das, he has obtained his PhD in chemistry in 1981 from University of Newcastle, UK, and gained several years of research experience at reputed laboratories across the world. And he joined the CSIR Institute at Trivandrum in 1989 as head of the newly established photochemistry research unit. He also has been a visiting scientist at several reputed institutions in different countries, and is a fellow of Indian National Academy, Indian National Science Academy, New Delhi, and Indian Academy of Science, Bangalore. Though a core photochemist by profession, he is also very much interested in the field of education and science management. And he has been very instrumental in motivating and nurturing many young scientists at CSIR NIST and KSCSTE, including me. And today we are very lucky to have him on this Teachers' Day, interacting with us on a very important topic, I believe, nurturing creativity, the role of the teacher. On behalf of KSCSTE and the entire participants here, I would like to welcome Suresh Das sir to the webinar. And I'm happy to inform all of you that we also have a team from NISH, National Institute of Speech and Hearing, to listen to our webinar. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Arjun, for the very kind introduction. I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
and can you see my presentation also?
Yes.
So I'll make it full screen in a minute. But let me also thank Dr. Anil Kumar and KSCST for this invitation to talk on this very special day, on Teachers' Day. And Arjun Prasad introduced me as one of the things he told also was that I'm a teacher. Of course, I have been a scientist and I have guided PhD students, but I have not had the experience of formal teaching. This is the first time I'm doing it now that I'm an Emeritus Professor in IISER. So I'm learning new things. But of course, all of us have great respect for this noble profession of teaching. And all of us are where we are because of the inputs of great teachers. So this is in that sense, I'm very happy to be speaking about speaking on this very special day. And thank you, Arjun, for organizing this and for the invitation. I will just move now to my presentation mode. And as Arjun mentioned, the topic that I thought I will discuss today is nurturing creativity and the role of the teacher. So,
Excuse me,
let
sir.
me, yeah.
Now at the presentation mode, I mean, the entire slide is not visible, sir.
Entire slide is not visible?
No, I think some portion are getting masked, I guess.
What is happening? What is covering it?
Now we can see only teacher, your name, designation, and Happy Teachers Day.
No, I
okay.
Kerala State Council for Science Technology.
You're not seeing the title?
No, sir. Anil sir, can you see the title, sir?
Right, I'm not seeing.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a part of the screen is gone. So should I see it on this mode?
Sir, I think, can you just stop presenting and try again, sir? Maybe
okay.
Some technical issues.
Are you able to see now?
No, sir.
Showing, sir. Screen not showing.
Just a minute. I'll just get some help.
Sure.
If you go here, it won't present. You have to go there. Go to the presentation.
This one. Yeah.
We can see this.
Can you see the screen now?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, you're not seeing the screen.
No.
Why do you cannot come?
We're not able to see the whole thing. Now,
Now it's coming.
Now,
Yeah, it is coming.
the full screen you are able to see?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Now
Okay.
it's
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem, sir. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So let's get back to where we were. And okay. So I thought I will start with a few quotations on what it means to be a teacher. And this is the first quotation I thought I will share with you from Malala Yousafzai. And I'm sure that many of you have heard it. One child, one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world. Now, of course, this was something that Malala would have said when she was very young, and you may think that it is a very naive statement that one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world. But let us put that statement in the context of this quotation by Henry Book Adams, another very great educationist who lived in the 19th and early 20th century. He said, teachers affect eternity. No one can tell where their influence stops. Okay, so when you see that in that context, you can see how important the role of a teacher in society. So I have one more quotation, and this is by Carl Augustus Menninger, who said, what a teacher is more important than what he teaches. Okay, what a teacher is more important than what he teaches. Let us take that and take a look at that statement, what it means. What a teacher is more important than what he teaches. Okay, so what is a teacher? It could be defined, you can define the teacher by the subject or he or she teaches. It could be physics teacher, chemistry teacher, an English teacher. So then how does he or she teach? That becomes the next question. So if you are a physics teacher, of course you master the subject, or chemistry or English, you become a master of the subject. And then you use various tools, lectures, notes. It depends whether you need experiments. Now, of course, in present conditions, you use online teaching. So this is how the teacher teaches. But the most important question that we need to ask is, why do you teach? And to me, that defines what a teacher is. Why did you become a teacher? Why did you choose to become a teacher? So in my opinion, this is the most important question that defines what a teacher is. Okay. So sometimes they say it's a good salary, the timings are good. So you can imagine a teacher who defines the profession by this, or what kind of teacher that teacher would be. There would be another teacher who's very passionate about that subject, and he wants to impart the excitement of that subject, share the relevance of that subject, how whether if it's a physics teacher, about light and colors and gravity and the planet and the real world implications of the subject, and becomes a very good teacher. But let us say that your why is that you're passionate about helping children achieve their true potential in life. Then it goes beyond. So you don't just restrict yourself to what your subject is, but you look into all aspects of a child's development. Okay, so you can see why you choose to do what you do is what makes you what I think in the definition of Carl Augustus Menninger, what a teacher is. Okay, so supposing you are you belong to the latter two categories, that is, that you're passionate about the subject and you're passionate about helping children achieve their true potential in life. Of course, it is difficult because the kind of stresses that a teacher faces. You have to teach the student discipline, competency, and that you have to. That is, supposing again I restrict to physics. There's so much of physics to be taught. Where is the time to go beyond that? Okay, because if you really want to talk about helping a child achieve the true potential, then you have to focus on many other things other than just teaching your discipline. Instilling confidence in the students, nurturing creativity, and so on. So where does one get the time for this? So I think that is where why this three questions, that going outwards from begin with the why becomes very important. And I think there is a very nice book which I think would help you to know that any activity that you do, instead of thinking about what I should do and how I should do it, the initial question is, why am I doing this in the first place? And that is Simon Sinek is a very motivating speaker. I have read many of his books, and he's on TED Talks and YouTube. Talks about, even today in COVID times, he's very active. So this book that he starts with, Start with the Why, is, I think, a good book that I would recommend to all, whichever profession that you follow. So as you can see from his what he has said here, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. But when you work hard for something that we love, that is called passion. So when you look at the what and the how, that is actually a cerebral activity, of the brain, activity of what do we do, they use logic. But when we ask the question, why do I do like this, then it touches the heart. That is why he says you love something and you become passionate. And when you do that, you don't find that time is a limit, because you never get tired, as I said. Working hard it doesn't create stress in you. You just feel that you're not able to do enough, and that is and anything that you're passionate about, whether it is teaching, whether it is mountain climbing, whether it's sports. So that finding that why you do that is very important. And I'm sure that many of us would have experienced or had the experience of being taught by such students, whether it is in LKG or in some of the higher classes. And that is what has helped us make us what we are today. And and to every country you can see has success to a certain extent, and this is the role played by such dedicated teachers who are passionate not only about teaching the subject, but passionate about seeing these children achieve their true potential in life. Okay, so such teachers will not just, as I said, restrict themselves to becoming a master of the discipline, but let's see, reading other aspects, reading other books, getting information everywhere from any source, become a researcher, in fact. And in that process, the teacher becomes creative. Because looking for opportunities on improving the way they do things. And that is basically the essence of creativity in a teacher. Because it's very important when we talk about nurturing creativity in students, it's very important that the teacher himself or herself has also got to be creative. So, and that creativity, as I said, very easily comes from the fact that you want to improve, continuously improve on things that are done, the way you do things, and how you can improve, how you can improvise. And these questions is what leads to a creativity. You don't remain stagnant. You don't teach the same thing year in and year out. You want to see how you can do things differently. You want to see how some special students can be helped in different ways. So this is again, so therefore very important that a teacher has this attitude, because without the teacher being creative, and you cannot nurture creativity in students. So what I thought I will do in this talk on nurturing creativity is, first of all, let us focus on why creativity is important. And also a lot of definitions on creativity. What is creativity? Okay. And what are the factors that promote or hinder creativity? And also, what can a teacher do to nurture creativity? So these are some of the questions that we will discuss. And okay, let's start with why is creativity important? Okay, so in our educational systems turns out so many students, and many of them end up looking for jobs. They don't find jobs. Many of them do, but many of them are, looking for an employment. They have gained a lot of knowledge by going to school or going to higher education institutions. They've gained knowledge, but they are not aware of what to do with that knowledge. In fact, they are waiting for somebody to give them a job and to tell them how to use that knowledge. So this, in my opinion, is a limitation. When you are spending so many years, the first 19 to 20 years of your life, studying so many things, and then you are not sure what you can do with that. That means there is something that has to be looked at in the education system. 20 years means you're practically 1/3 of your professional life is over. When you're 60, you retire in a country like India. And, so by the age of 20, you have completed a major portion of your life. And yet you're not clear as to what is it that you can, in what way you can contribute. And it's not that we don't have problems. A country like India has enormous number of problems which require solutions. Whether it is the disparity, whether it's social problems, inequity, whether it is climate change, whether it is sustainable agriculture. So there are so many opportunities, because problems are actually opportunities. And you have gained so much of knowledge, and you should be able to apply that knowledge in some way, somewhere, get together with people. And so that is how do you get into an education system that makes people focus outwards instead of now that I have got all this, what do I get with this, and in what way can I contribute? And then very clearly you're and what is it that I have with my skills that I can make a difference in societies. And then certainly opportunities are there everywhere, you know. And it's also very important because when you tend to be creative, it helps you to develop a certain confidence, because one of the essence of creativity is that you must learn to fail. When you do the routine thing, when you do something again and again, there is no chance of failure, but it becomes something that is you do without much thinking. But if you want to do anything that is new, you have to risk making a mistake. So creative people by nature have already lived through and survived many failures, and that gives them the confidence that they can take on anything new, because they know that even if they fail in that, they can make a difference and they can still get up and do something. That's so for an individual also, it is very important to learn the creative part. And then the third aspect is, if you are creative, you are not threatened by uncertainty. You can see today the circumstances of COVID, and who would have predicted something like this? But you know, instead of getting into a sense of depression, instead of getting worried about the future, a creative person will think, what is it that can I do under certain these kind of conditions? In what way can I make a difference? Okay, so flexible thinking allows for the flow of the unknown, which is very important. And therefore, studies have shown, and this is an article in the Scientific American based on a scientific study, that creative people live longer. It's not intelligence or overall openness to ideas that makes you live longer. It is apparently the creative aspect of your life that helps you, because, as I said, you know, you are able to take life in your stride. You always see opportunities in life, and you're continuously growing. You're learning, you're looking for opportunities to grow. So that is how you define, in a way, a creative person. And especially so, creativity is important for the 21st century. You know, the change, the only constant thing about the world is change. And change happens. And change, the only thing that is different is that the rate of change is getting faster and faster. So, for example, you take the agricultural age. We were farmers as human beings for thousands of years, you know, and then just for hundreds of years, we were in so-called industrial age. And now, just for a few decades, we were what is called as an informational age. And now, this is also changing. We're talking about artificial intelligence, robotics. So even the information age is changing. And now what Daniel Pink calls, we are entering what is called as the conceptual age, okay? So in the industrial age, information age, we were focused on accumulation of data and an emphasis on reductive or analytic thinking, linear thinking. But in the conceptual age, where creativity and idea generation is going to become important, it is very important to, if you really want to be relevant, and people, you know, either you become an independent entrepreneur or some work for somebody, you have to develop the ability to have flexible thinking, imagination, and creative practice. So this becomes extremely important in the 21st century, much more than the last century. So what is then creativity? Okay, there are many, very often we link creativity with the arts, painting, music, and dance. But if you paint the same picture again and again, that is not creativity. If you sing the same song again and again, that is not creativity. And same thing with the dance, okay? So people who innovate, and in sense, even in the arts, creativity means that you innovate. You appeal to different kind of aesthetics. And there is also a message that your paintings, your music, your dance, that is sending to society. Or sometimes it is just a matter of appreciating that beauty. And, you know, so that is why we have many classic music, which we call classical music, because they stay because of their creative nature, whereas many songs just come and go. So in arts, of course, we easily recognize what is creativity. But in when we talk about the sciences, when you talk about engineering, we think it is all a matter of discipline and logic and just brain work. But it is very important, even as mathematicians, as engineers, as salespersons, administrators, even politicians and scientists can display creativity. Okay. So doing something differently. One very important thing that we must remember is we think of people as being creative or not creative. It's an inborn quality, a talent, but that is not the way to look at it. Anybody can learn to be creative. It's a skill that you can learn based on the kind of confidence. It requires a certain amount of confidence that I can do. And that is one very important skill that is required if you want to be creative. So what is it? Creativity involves transforming ideas, imaginations, and thoughts into reality. Okay, so you can have a very good idea, and that is it could lead to a creativity, but it is not a creativity in itself unless that idea actually gets implemented and moves on into society, and that is what is creativity. So creativity is not just simply novelty. Novelty or originality is important, but it has also to be relevant, and it has also to be applied or of interest to people other than yourself. And so that is what is creativity. Okay, I would like to give you the quotation by Maria Popova, who writes a lot on the aspect of creativity, and I will read this definition. It is the ability to connect the seemingly unconnected. So 2 or 3 areas where others don't see connection, a creative person will see a connection. And this seemingly unconnected and meld existing knowledge into new insight about some element of how the world works. And this she calls as practical creativity. What I mentioned about, something which is novel and something which is relevant and leads to something that is useful in the last sense. So this is practical creativity. Then she says there is what is called as a moral creativity, to apply the skill towards some kind of wisdom on how the world ought to work. Many of us take the way the world works as something that we accept it without questioning. For example, when we talk about the development of a nation, we talk about the GDP. Is the GDP the definition? If I give the example of the United States, which has a very high GDP, but when we see what is happening there, we can start asking questions. Is that the way a developed nation should behave? Okay. And also when we talk about today, one of the problems that we face in climate change, sustainable development, has something gone wrong in the way we do things? So asking these kind of questions, how do we learn to do that? If we just accept, and this is the way things are, that is which limits our creativity. Why can't it be something else? Why can't it be different? What is it that I can do to make a difference? Then you start linking up with your creativity. And so this picture that I have shown on the side comes from a book on creativity. So, ideas mesh with each other, unrelated systems come together, you are able to link this and again and again. And so the very good example somebody gave was of a potato. If a potato is sitting on a table, it's hard and it remains a potato. But once you cut it up and put it in with the other vegetables in the soup, it starts absorbing the environment. So you put yourself in an environment where different kinds of influences, different kinds of books you read, and then slowly the potato starts soaking in these ingredients and if you take it out after 5 minutes, the surface will have changed, but the inside still remains a potato. By the end of the cooking, the potato is hardly recognizable. So this is what happens to a creative person. He doesn't want to remain, give the example, remain a potato. He wants to immerse himself into an environment where he's open to influences, he's open to ideas, he reads a lot, even movies and arts and sciences and different subjects. It's okay, I'm a physicist, so I will only do physics, or I'm a chemist and I will only study chemistry. So that kind of attitude changes. And when we take today, even in science, much of that innovation and creativity happens in interdisciplinary areas. So interdisciplinary meaning not being just between the sciences, between the science and the arts. So all of this contribute to creativity. So I think that is the definition that Maria Popova has given. And then there is another very famous writer and researcher. His name is a little difficult to pronounce. It is actually pronounced as Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He's an author, and he's done a lot of research on creativity. And one of the books is The Psychology of Discovery and Invention, and another book called Flow. I don't know if it's a book, but he writes a lot on what is called as flow. He says that a creative person, when he is really excited about what he's doing, he's in a state of what is known as flow. And that means he doesn't know time is passing. He gets so involved that you suddenly go into the morning, into your work, and by the time you are aware of what is happening, it is already evening. And that is the kind of excitement that happens in a creative person. So, and earlier in the previous slide, I had mentioned about how creativity leads to long life. What is the link between creativity and long life? I think that comes through if you look at the definition that Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is giving. He says creativity is a central source of meaning in our lives. It's beyond what we think of us as it is something to do with me, something to do with more than just our lives. Okay, most of the things that that are interesting, important, and human are the results of creativity. And when we are involved in it, we feel that we are living more fully than during the rest of the life. So creative people have that sense of meaning in their life, and that is why they are always looking externally, and therefore they want to see, and therefore in many sense their health parameters will be much better than so-called non-creative person. When we talk about creativity, there are distinct stages of creativity. First is, of course, ideation, imagination. Very, very important. I will tell you how important imagination is and what Einstein thought about imagination. But we can't stop there. Once we have a good, so-called good idea, then of course we have to prepare. That is the next stage. You have to research on it. You have to immerse yourself, like I mentioned about a potato in a soup, into that area, consume as much information, gather, So this is the stage which is called preparation. And then comes the incubation. So you have all this information, you have an idea, then you want to explore, experiment it, see where it works. And then suddenly when you're doing all this, you get what is called as the aha moment. Some flash of lightning and thunder, you may call it. Something clicks and thinks, this is something that nobody has looked at doing this in this way, and this seems to be entirely important, and this seems to be relevant. And that is called the aha moment. And once you have that, then of course you have to become the critic, because you don't defend it because it's your idea. You have to be the critic, much more than anybody else. You have to reflect upon it, you have to criticize it, you have to call others to find flaws in it. And then only it becomes something which is a bit more solid. And once you have done all that, like the idea of an ideation and imagination is like an artist and a poet, but finally the implementation is hard work. You have to construct, you have to write, you have to implement. So this is a stage where you work like an accountant or a clerk. You don't use your emotions anymore. So the level of emotions, you start with ideation, imagination, you think like a poet, as I said, creative thinking, but then finally as you get into the different stages, you become more and more practical, pragmatic, and start thinking with your brain, and that is what I meant by thinking more like an accountant and a clerical person to get everything in place. And then all of this together is what leads to a creative endeavor. Okay. So I mentioned about imagination. What is the link between imagination and creativity? Einstein had said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited because it's all about what happened yesterday or in the past. Okay, so it is already available. You can, so there's a limitation. imagination has no limits. You can, think about the future, whether it is in terms of science fiction or fantasy. There is no limit to imagination. So you really, as long as you are limiting yourself to knowledge, you're sitting within the box. What imagination tries to do is to get you out of that box. So, and this is a very famous quotation, and not many people are sure whether Einstein actually said this or not. Apparently, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. So I looked it up, and apparently there is no clarity of whether Einstein really said this, but there is some statement that when a parent approached Einstein as to refer, asking him what kind of books she could suggest to her children to get them to become more successful in life, he suggested you read to them fairy tales. And she felt a little insulted, and she felt that Einstein was trying to put her down. But he meant really, he said, no, if you want them to be successful in life and be able to be independent, you read to them fairy tales. And if you want them to be more successful, you read them more fairy tales. He didn't use the word intelligence because Einstein wouldn't do that. So he says that when you read fairy tales and fantasies and mythologies, you're using a part of the brain that is actually dealing with innovation, what sometimes we call as the right brain thinking. Okay, so we shouldn't mistake it with intelligence, and that those are limited terms. So fantasizing, because when you treat fairy tales, in fairy tales anything can happen. Somebody can fly, some animals can talk, in mythology also. So all kinds of science fiction, all of this, there is no limitation. That's like, it is not limited to the knowledge that we have. And so this is the kind of thinking that is required for a creative person. Thinking without boundaries. And children, when they imbibe this ability to think like this by reading fairy tales and fantasy, tend to, so that in a very young age, the importance of reading different kinds of books, fiction, fairy tales, and you can see that if you look at many famous scientists and in their interviews, if you find many of them have this habit of reading very different kinds of books. It was not just their science or their subject or whatever that was. They used to read many, many different things. Okay. Another aspect that is linked very closely to creativity is humor. I've given here pictures of two very famous scientists. It would be nice to see professors in India who were behave like this. At this left side, of course, famous Einstein, and many of you would have heard Feynman, Richard Feynman. He's written here physicist and bongo player. Had a very great sense of humor. Many of you would have read his book. Surely you must be joking. That's the book that he had written. And you look at the quotation here, study hard what interests you most. And you see, in the most undisciplined and irreverent and original manner. These are terms which are important. The reverence to your teacher is important, but there is, if you really want to be creative, to some extent, you have to be irreverent. You have to ask questions. You have to doubt. You have to ask maybe stupid questions, and teachers have to encourage this when we are talking overly stressing on discipline. It kills creativity. Unfortunately, in many of our institutions, even in scientific institutions, focus is on discipline, because this creativity and humor and the fun of learning, the joy of learning, is very closely linked to creativity. In fact, there was a study which was done where they had cartoons, people who draw cartoons and comics and others come up with some cliches for advertisements. And when they found that people who have are comedians or who have the tendency to write or who are professional comic writers tend to come up with a huge number of ideas compared to some of the people from different other professions. And to contrast that, what they did was, there was another study where they take two groups of people, and one group was made to watch a horror movie, and the other some other maybe comedy or something, and then look at the way they give them certain creative tests. And there was very clear link the people, of showing that when you have watched a horror movie, your creativity level actually comes down. So creates a kind of a stress in you, and stress affects creativity in a negative manner. So fun, enjoying what you do is very, very important if you want to be creative. Okay. The freedom to make mistakes. Okay, there's a quotation by Joseph Sheldon Pierce. To live a creative life, we must lose our fear of being wrong. And there are many examples. If you take the examples of many of those, whether it's scientists or whether it is any other field, if people have reached the peak in some sort of way, you would have said that they would have survived many, many mistakes. So this is an address that J.K. Rowling in 2008, she's Harry Potter series, I think the author, addressed in a Harvard graduating class in 2008. It says, it is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default. So what is the use of living a life where you have not done something or risked something beyond what you're already capable of? Okay, so she says, in which case you have failed by default. So this is by J.K. Rowling. And here again, I quote Einstein, a person who never made a mistake never tried anything new. And the famous quotation by Thomas Edison, who said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work. So this is important. And, when our education system, where we are focusing only on competing and only on getting things right and not failing, and giving an education system where failure is seen as it is through failing that we learn. If you're not failing, if as a small child, if I am not able to multiply the numbers, then that means I already know it. I'm not learning anything new. In order to learn something more complicated, I have to initially start making mistakes. And then I make fewer and fewer mistakes. And that is how I learn. So how do we, instead of when a child makes a mistake, instead of berating it, to
Hello.
Hello, not hearing.
Oh, okay. Hello, Dasar. Hello.
this is the experiment. People are given a candle.
So sorry to interrupt. We missed you in between.
Oh, sorry. From where?
At the end of the last slide, I guess.
Should you want me to go back? Yeah.
Yeah. Towards the end, we heard the quote of Thomas Edison, and after.
Okay. No, so you didn't miss much. It was just a Japanese proverb, which says, "Fall down 6, get up 7." So just I thought, it's just trying to tell you the importance of having to fail or making mistakes. So I do not know if I mentioned that in school, if you're learning math, for example, if you want to learn more and more complicated multiplication tables, a child has to be making mistakes if he's actually learning. So if a child makes a mistake, that means he has not mastered that, and he's in the process of learning that process of multiplication or addition. So berating a child has a detrimental effect. But recognizing that child who's making the mistake is actually learning something which it doesn't know yet, and is trying to get on to the next stage, that is what a teacher needs to recognize, right? So then coming back to this carrot and stick, as I said, there is a feeling that you either reward or punish can help people perform better. And this is again a myth. I think that needs to be corrected. And I will give you a very good show you a very good experiment which proves that. Okay, this is the experiment. People are given this candle, matchbox, and a box with pins. And what they are told to do is that they have to fix this lit candle on the wall without the wax falling on the floor. Okay, so this is the experiment that people are asked to do. Now, then they divide this into two groups of people. One group is incentivized, so-called carrot. They're given, they say that you do this, you will get a large sum of money. Let us say $50 or 2,000 rupees. The other is not given any incentive. It's an unincentivized group. And then they compare this group, how many of them finish it, how fast this is completed, and which group do you think succeeds? Okay, this is an experiment that has been done in the US, in Canada, in Germany, and even in India, in places like Madurai. Wherever you do it, the result is always the same. And it comes as a surprise to many that it is the unincentivized groups that complete this problem faster and more efficiently than the incentivized groups. This, so what is the solution? Solution is very simple. You empty the pins, you use the box, pin the box onto the wall, put the candle there. Okay. Now they change the experiment. What they do with this is that now you have an experiment where the pins are kept outside. You have the box, you have the candle, and you have the matchbox. Okay, so slight difference between this, the one that you see here, and the one that you see here. Okay, now again they break the groups into incentivized and unincentivized groups. This time what they find is that the incentivized groups, that the people who are given incentive, do this work much faster than the unincentivized group. So what does this experiment tell us? See, here there is a certain amount of creativity involved, because you have to recognize that the box is also something that you can use. Okay, so some creative idea that you must take out the pins and then this box is useful, I can put the box here. And whereas in this case, the box is also already seen as a tool. I can take these pins, fix it. So creativity here is less than here. So what they are saying is that even an ounce of creativity is required. Incentivization doesn't work. You must have a free mind. Okay, but if you're doing routine work, which doesn't require much creativity, then it doesn't matter, incentivize. So if you're doing routine work, if you're making same parts, or you're working in an automobile industry where you're focusing on the number of parts that have to be made and you don't have to think about it, then you pay them more, you work overtime, you give them rewards, then the productivity goes. That is the industrial age. But if creativity is involved, the mind needs to be free thinking, and so this carrot and stick very often will not work. Okay, so again, a very, very nice TED talk by Daniel Pink. I would recommend all of you to listen to it, where he talks about this experiment and then many other aspects of how the creativity is important. So the reason for that is, whenever you have an external motivation, whether it is discipline or carrot, a stick, or a reward, which is a carrot, then you're talking about an extrinsic motivation. Motivation is coming from outside. Whereas if you're talking about doing things because you really enjoy doing it, or the challenge of doing that, that is an intrinsic motivation. So discipline, time pressure, and reward, therefore, tends to hinder creativity. And very few people who manage organizations, even including innovative organizations, recognize this. And, where we feel that overall discipline is much more important than anything else in making your institution great. And another important ingredient is, of course, and which I consider the most important, is self-confidence. Okay? Without self-confidence, the capability to say that I can do, you cannot be creative. And this is the most basic ingredient that we as teachers have to instill upon students, young students. Whereas you have to, especially in schools and the smallest classes, the teachers are seen as giants for the children. They're like, you imagine that I was in a museum in Calicut. When I walked into a room, the table was the size of almost twice my height. And and the chairs were also twice my height. And so I asked him, the idea there was to get you an impression of how the child sees the world, you know. So when you have these tall people walking around and professing that they know everything and you don't know everything, children tend to believe this and they lose their confidence. Whereas if a grown-up and mature person whom you respects you, then you grow up with a sense of confidence. And that is where instilling self-confidence is one of the most important ingredients that a teacher can do. And if many of us go back and remember, some teacher who thought that we were good at something is the one who gave us the confidence to be able to do whatever we have been able to do in life. Okay. So creativity, far from requiring some rare gift or a skill, depends on what you believe you can do with your talents and skills you already have. Okay, so that confidence is what leads to creativity. That can-do attitude. You need confidence to be truly creative. Okay, so of course this is a subject, creativity can go on, and I don't want to spend too much time about it, but I have given you a list of things, some of which I talked about, some of which I will not be able to. But you can see that confidence tops the list. The ability to question without fear, the ability to think that I can make a difference, and how can we instill that confidence in a younger generation, because then they will be able to solve the problems the country is facing. Okay, so observation, seeing problems very clearly, getting new ideas out of it, humility, knowing that you don't know everything. You need to ask, you need to get the information from here, you need to get the information from there, you could be wrong. This is very important. Mindfulness, thinking on how to think. How does my brain work? What makes me think this way and not that way? Curiosity, extremely important. Exploring and experimenting. Resourcefulness, finding something to tinker with, finding a tool here, a tool there. Sometimes in India we call the idea jugaad, finding simple things that will solve your problems. Energy to explore and tinker and action. Without all the last part, however confident if you're lazy and you don't go about and completing your project, you cannot be creative. And there are many, many others also that we have done. So when a teacher looks at all this, then you are worried, if I'm going to be teaching a discipline and I'm focusing on it, how can I instill all these things and nurture all these things in my student? So won't that require extra time? So I think that one thing I would like to share with you is a new kind of thinking that is coming up. And the coming slides are slides which I have borrowed from my wife, who is a counselor. And, she has been looking into these aspects of, and she brought to my attention this book and this research that is done by Dr. Carol Dweck, a professor of psychology at Stanford University, one of the leading researchers in the field of motivation. And she talks about what is known as a growth mindset and the need for teachers to first of all acquire a growth mindset and then to instill a growth mindset in students. Okay. Again, she also speaks on the Tube, on TED Talks, I think, and you can get a lot more information there. But what's a mindset? A mindset is a set of personal beliefs and is a way of thinking that influences your behavior and attitude towards yourself and others. This is how you see the world, either positively, negatively, opportunities, depression. So that is the mindset that you have, how you see the world. So therefore, a teacher's mindset actually creates the atmosphere in the classroom and has a strong influence on the students' developing mindset. Okay. So let us go to, that again, I bring back that old quotation which I had mentioned. So this mindset of the teacher defines the teacher, what the teacher is. So it is very, very important that the teacher develops the right kind of mindset if you want to help the students develop that. So there are two ways to think about learning. Okay, one is called what we say the fixed mindset. Fixed mindset, when we think about a fixed mindset, we believe that somebody has talents or doesn't, has abilities or does not, is intelligent or is not, is creative, and all these are come as a package when you're born. A belief that a student either has or doesn't have them is the fixed mindset. To contrast that, you have what is known as the growth mindset. The growth mindset believes that abilities, including intelligence, can be developed through practice, creativity, and all of these aspects that I talk about here can be developed through practice, perseverance, and dedication. Okay, so this is what is defined the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And when you very clearly, you will see that in many of our teachers tend to label students as either being intelligent or not being intelligent or being lazy. So these are all the way of thinking is a fixed mindset thinking. Whereas even if somebody is not doing his work, there could be reasons. There could be, if we take a little effort to understand what is the what is happening, we can change many of these, recognizing that it is not something that a person is the nature of a person, but it is a skill that can be acquired. Okay, so let's go through some of these aspects. If you have a fixed mindset, you believe that your intelligence is fixed, and growth mindset, intelligence can be developed. Same thing can be said about creativity. So how do these two different people think? So when you face challenges, you will try to avoid challenges. Okay, so if as a child is labeled as being not intelligent and he is facing challenges, he will say, I'm not able to do it. He will avoid challenges. And interestingly, if you label a child as being very intelligent, even that child will avoid challenges, because he doesn't, in case he fails, world will come to know he's not that intelligent. So whether you label a child as intelligent or not intelligent in a fixed mindset segment, that is a negative, has negative connotations, because both the intelligent child which is labeled as intelligent and one which is labeled as not intelligent, both will avoid challenges for different reasons, but they will avoid challenges. Whereas if you have the growth mindset, you will embrace challenges because this is an opportunity to learn. Same thing with obstacles. You give up easily. If you have a fixed mindset, you persist in the face of setbacks. Failure is not a problem. Effort, you see effort as fruitless or give up easily. You see effort as a path to mastery. You know, each time you do something, you become better and better. Criticism, you ignore useful negative feedback. Whereas I'm sorry. Ignore useful. Whereas if you got a growth mindset, you learn from criticism. When you see success of others, if you have a fixed mindset, you feel threatened. But if you have a growth mindset, you find lessons and inspirations from other people's success. Okay. As a result, people who have a fixed mindset will plateau out very early in life, whereas people who have a growth mindset will continuously grow and achieve greater heights. Okay. So the focus on a fixed mindset is on identity. What kind of a person are you? Whereas in the growth mindset, focus is always on learning. So so therefore you have to train students to think positively. Each one of us knows that we have an inner voice that speaks to us. Every time something positive happens or negative happens, we have a way of talking to us. So how do you develop a certain inner voice that helps you to think positively? So helping children to develop an encouraging, supporting inner voice can help to change their mindset. Okay. So fixed mindset, growth mindset, what can I say to myself on different occasions? Instead of having a fixed mindset, let's try thinking of a growth mindset thinking. I can't can be changed to I'm learning how to. This is too hard can be changed to I will try a different strategy. I made a mistake can be changed to mistakes help me to learn better. I never do it like they do. What can I learn from them? I give up. I'll try some different strategy. Okay. So every child has needs to belong, to feel significant, to feel valued, to feel capable, to be psychologically visible, that is to have their feelings seen, heard, and understood. Every child also has fears, not being good enough, rejected, humiliated, unaccepted, and unloved. Okay. A child whose needs are met and who is not fearful will naturally mature into a respectful, responsible, self-motivated, and I will add here, a creative individual. So helping children to develop a growth mindset is one of the most important. So you can see here that apart from, along with teaching a discipline, there's not much extra that you need to do. Just need to understand how the perspective of the world looks from the view, from the mind of a child. This empathy that teachers need to develop. And I feel that even if in a country like ours, if 10 to even 15% of our teachers have this kind of outlook, we can become a developed nation where people can become successful. So this empathy is what is required. I think I have come more or less to the end of my talk. I will stop with sorry, this is the repeat. Okay, something. So what we need to create, if you want to have a creative children, is to create a kind of a people place where children can feel okay to be themselves, where the potential is recognized. And so I'll end this with a nice poem by William Crocker on what he defines as a people place. I think it's a very nice poem. He says, if this is not a place where tears are understood, where do I go to cry? If this is not a place where my spirits can take wing, where do I go to fly? If this is not a place where my questions can be asked, where do I go to seek? If this is not a place where my feelings can be heard, where do I go to speak? If this is not a place where you will accept me as I am, where can I go to be? And if this is not a place where I can try to learn and grow, where can I just be me? So I think with this, I think I have tried my little bit to help you understand what is creativity and how we can nurture, and how this process can help the future generations be more creative and more successful and more happy and independent in life. So I think with that I stop. Thank you, Arjun, for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. As always done, I mean, it's always an inspiring talk from you. And I think it's not more than, I mean, it's not an informative talk, but I think it's an eye-opener for many of us, especially when putting in the concepts of growth mindset and the confidence which tops the list when you're nurturing a child. I think it's applicable for both teachers and parents as well.
Thank you.
And we have a couple of questions from our participants, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So it's regarding the conceptual age, sir, the transition from informational to conceptual age.
Yeah.
So essential to restructure the curriculum, especially in the higher education sector, to suit the creativity of learners.
Yeah, no, I didn't follow the question. Can you just explain to me?
Like in accordance with the transition from this informational age to the conceptual age.
Oh, okay, yeah, what I mentioned that, yeah. That, you know, if you look at what we are talking, see, when you're talking about the conceptual, why importance of the conceptual age? You see, the 21st century, we are talking now about artificial intelligence, robotics. So much of what is known as routine work will be taken care of by automation. For example, if you're talking about an automobile industry, so many jobs are going to disappear. Okay. So even a complicated surgery can sometimes be done by a machine, you know. So when you are coming to that kind of world, then who are the people who are going to be needed? If everything is going to be done by robots or machines. So therefore, people who are able to create something, who can offer something that is in terms of either aesthetically creative or it is practically creative. And, you know, I was told that, you know, a landscape artist or a gardener, his job will never disappear. You know, nobody can, so it's not just that high level jobs. So where you can do something which can bring what a machine cannot do. Machine cannot think of new concepts. It can do routine work. It can do calculations for you. It can do the mathematics for you. but it cannot use mathematics to design a new kind of chocolate or find out how the society or it can be, you know, I mean, there's so many things, even in simple applied mathematics, there are so many ways of applying mathematics.
Yeah.
A computer can do all kinds of calculation, but to apply that mathematics in an innovative way. And so in every subject, there will be an opportunity like that to conceptually, do something that is different. Whereas a very good example I can give you is that, you know, they say that in the last century, for education, we used what is known as a industrial language.
Okay.
Right? We talked about our schools as producing great products. Your student was a product.
Yeah.
You talked about the quality of the product. You know, you looked at the uniformity of the product. So these students were seen as a products. Just so the language that we used was the language of the industrial age.
Yeah.
Okay. What they say is it is better to use agricultural language. So yeah, so it is of course much older, but agricultural language is what? You provide a nurturing environment.
Yeah.
You help a child to grow to its whole potential. You don't expect one kind of fruit from another kind of plant,
Yeah.
right? You don't grow, a rose in another flower plant, and the other way. You don't grow tomatoes in some other plant. So each plant has its potential. Each child has a potential. So how do we help them to get and achieve that and become successful in life? That is what we need to do. So coming back to the example of informative to transformation, from informative to conservative. So just having, like Einstein said, knowledge alone is not enough. We have to be able to mix knowledge from different fields. We have to be creative. We have to be able to develop new concepts and provide new solutions to existing problems. We are not short of problems in our country. There are all kinds of problems, societal problems. You know, when we talk about, you just take out the newspaper, there are so many areas we need to address. If people come together, they can create their own jobs addressing some. Old age is a problem in a state like Kerala. You know, there require solutions. You know, when we talk about communities, between communities, there are issues. There are so many things that we need to become a modern society. So as a country, we are not short of problems. How do we actually get together in a creative manner and not wait for somebody to employ us? The knowledge that we have, how do we use it to bring about a transformation in society? That is, I think, so concepts there become much more important than just having that information or knowledge.
Yes, sir. As the teacher rightly pointed out, I think we need to have or interfere in the setting of the curriculum as well to address the issue, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So another a couple of questions is regarding the problem with kids or people losing their creativity as they grow up. And most of them point out that as kids, they are more creative, and as they grow up, they lose the creativity. And definitely, is it something due to the teaching learning process?
Definitely. I mean, every child is born a scientist. Actually, if you really watch a child, a very small child, interact with the external environment, you will see how the level of curiosity, the kind of questions that is asked. So if they are losing the creativity, then I think we have to look at ourselves, how we are teaching, making, if some students find a subject boring, it's not the problem of the student, very clearly, so therefore something has to be done. And you see that in schools that discipline is such a very important term, and it kills creativity. I know, for example, when my daughter was very young, she says that if the teacher has to go out for about 15-20 minutes, the child is asked to, all the children are asked to keep quiet for those 20 minutes, and the monitor is watching. And any child which is able to keep absolutely silent for 20 minutes has nothing in there, So, and if there is a small child which makes, if there's some kid who makes a lot of trouble, probably the most creative person who is frustrated of being told to sit quiet for 20-30 minutes, we can't do that, unless we are, so that kind of, so then to ask the question as to what happened to their creativity, we have to ask ourselves that question. How did we manage to do that? You know.
So another question just popped up related to the conceptual age, like how the conceptual age is going to change the role of a teacher.
Yeah, so and I said, very important is that we have no other option other than to instill the focus. Very important that we don't ignore discipline, physics, chemistry, English. We have to be a master of that subject as a teacher. That is very important. But other than that, is the basic instilling. You don't have to do much. You just need to instill that self-confidence in a child, that he has the capability to look for their potential. Not everybody is equal, and to make them to start competing is making them compete with each other. And this grading and all has that problem. I'm not saying that you can avoid all that, but over and above that, a teacher can help to get the child to recognize how important it is to cooperate. One of the most important things that's going to come up in the conceptual age is that you have to learn to cooperate. You cannot do everything. You don't have the knowledge. It was probably Edison's time. You could invent a lot of things just by sitting Edison and a few supporters. But today, if you need the amount of knowledge that you need to bring out anything creative, and from desperate fields, you didn't need that knowledge. You need to cooperate. You need to be asking here. So cooperation, how do we, I would say that if you get children to work on projects cooperatively, and then when they bring up those projects, not to evaluate them as a competitive method, tendency to give prizes and awards, but to see how, for example, one good idea I would suggest that you have these projects done by different groups of children, and have a different group present the project made by another group, rather than I present my group presenting this project. I would request another group of students to present this child's project. That way, he's defending somebody else's project. You understand? So the idea of appreciating somebody else, the idea of encouraging and cooperating, rather than trying to compete and pull down that man's project and say my project is better, that kind of culture will help a long way in. And independent thinking is also, to me, very important.
So having your education abroad and also having professional experience there and as well as in India, do you think culture has something to do with influence the creativity of children?
Yeah, definitely. When you say that, we have Asian culture is overly hierarchical, whether it is talking not just India, whether we talk about China, Japan, Korea, we have to tend very, clear hierarchical roles are there. Parent-teacher relationship, parent-child, teacher-child. So I would say that if we can help to change a little bit of that, bring in a lot more freedom. Many teachers, students, when I was a PhD student in England, my professor insisted that I call him by his first name. He calls me by the first name. It was very difficult for me to make that transition, going from here to there, where we always call somebody sir or professor. So it took me almost a few months to transform and call him by his first name, Alistair or George. So but that brings in a kind of breaks the boundaries between the teacher and the student. And then you talk casually and you ask questions, and without asking questions, you cannot learn. And very clearly, a teacher has a lot more information and a student has less. So therefore, there's no doubt that the student will feel that lack of confidence. But I remember one teacher, you said that I have been abroad. I was also in Baghdad, for some time, and I had a professor there whom I respected a lot. And he was a very famous professor, but he told me that where I am today is your starting point. You are going to know everything that I know, and this is your starting point. This is my end point. This is your starting point. These are teachers. So you are actually standing on their shoulders. So humility is very important among teachers. Instead of trying to tell the kids that they know everything and you don't know everything, they are the future, So therefore, recognizing that and helping them to go above and beyond us, and that's true sense of teacher. It is only this profession in teaching is one of the few professions where you are most excited when your students do better than you.
Okay.
You know.
I don't know why the question just came up, like, will teachers lose their job in a conceptual age? I think the teacher's role gets...
Not at all. Not at all. I would say that the teachers are one profession which is going to be, and that is where the creative teacher, if you're going to, if you're just going to teach multiplication tables, that can be done by a computer. If you're going to teach some simple writing sentences, that can be done by computer. But how to get the child to grow to his full potential? Impossible to do that without a teacher. That is where, again, in the conceptual age, the teacher has to invent himself. And just as you see, when you look at the growth mindset, the process is not difficult. Just recognizing the ability to have the empathy to see the world from the child's viewpoint automatically helps you to become the teacher that you should be.
Yeah.
The student can guide you into becoming a good teacher.
Yeah. I think it's time that teachers also need to recognize that they are students as well, along with teachers.
Yes, forever. A creative person remains student. That is why I say, if you look at that idea that the creative people live longer, it is that you remain a student all your life. So your brain is always active, trying to learn, and that's what keeps you young.
Great. And another important issue is the keeping how to improve the concentration in students. I think it's difficult this time, especially in this era of digital age. Teachers find it difficult to keep the attention, the concentration of students.
Yeah. See, that is, very important question, actually, when there is so much of distraction today and electronic distraction. And so that is, again, I go back to the quotation of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who talks about flow. Even forget about children, even as adults, we find it so difficulty to focus on some issue. Our mind tends to wander. So, but whereas if you're doing something which really excites you, you don't even know that the other things are available. So how do we? That's the challenge for a teacher. How do we link up? See, for example, as a science teacher, you teach about the elements. I give an example on oxygen. You say where it is in the periodic table. You talk about its properties. So this is one way of teaching. But supposing you ask a child, even a small child, you think that a child is too early to think about things like this. You ask him, what came first? Did life come first? Or did oxygen come first? The child may not have all the concepts to understand it, but then he has to start asking such questions. If oxygen, life came first, then how did life there without oxygen? So this kind of things. And then you also know at which stage oxygen started coming and how that is important. And so, I'm talking, you take any instance, when you link up what you're studying, instead of just looking at the atomic number of oxygen and describing its chemical property, actually linking it to the real world. 20% of the Earth's atmosphere is oxygen. Why don't we burn up? The child may not get the full answer, but then that it has some relevance to the real world. So there are so many, everything that you study in the textbook has a real world influence. So linking that up, then when the child sees that, then he gets much more interested. You can't do that all the time because there is, as I said, curriculum to be fixed, curriculum to be learned, and so discipline is necessary. Discipline, focus on the chemistry, physics. But along with that, each time when you show some aspect, that is what makes the extraordinary teacher.
Okay.
Go beyond.
So just one final question. I think we all have many questions, but due to time constraints, I'm just limiting to the final questions. So, like many teachers, even my parents, they used to tell about the teacher-student interaction, how intimate was they with some of the teachers. So many teachers also complain. We come across different kinds of issues happening these days across, and because of this, I think the kind of relationship, the teacher-student relationship, is not in a good position, like maybe at your age or something. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts regarding that? How we can improve, and how significant is to improve the student-teacher relations?
Oh, very important. I mean, like any relationship, I would say that the term that I think a teacher has to, the capability that a teacher has to develop, in my opinion, is empathy. It's very easy to label a student as being troublesome or being indisciplined. What do you know about the background of that child? What do you know? What are the things that are going on in the child's life? So therefore, that is where I said changing from a fixed mindset and thinking this is a troublesome child. Obviously, something has made that child troublesome, right?
Yeah.
And that is where the intimacy comes, because then you are going beyond just labeling and finding out how and what is happening in that child's life and what it is that I can do to make a difference. So the term that is most important is empathy. In any relationship between any two people, instead of trying to impose my view on you, to understand why you have said that and why, and what is the background with which you have made that statement, whether it's an angry statement or an indisciplined act. What was the cause of that? This doesn't happen. Nobody is born, to do something terrible. So that is the fixed mindset that we need to change.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It was really wonderful.
Thank you. It's very nice. Unfortunately, it's online. It would have been nice. So happy Teachers' Day to everybody, and
thank you, sir.
People seem to be around, so on a Saturday, that's
Yeah.
very good. So very nice. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Also, I'm Dr. Anil Kumar and KSCSTE. Thank you.
And we have Dr. Sharika here to propose
okay. Long time since I saw her also.
Over to you, Sharika.
Hello, sir.
I don't see you. Where are you? There. Sharika? There you are.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Happy Teachers' Day, dear sir.
Happy Teachers' Day. Yeah.
And we have been hearing the kind of talk you have made. Long before when you were at KCST also. We have experienced it a lot, and definitely, as Arjun said, this is definitely an eye opener, and we have got something to think of. For at least for 2 days. So much you have told, sir.
Thank you.
And on behalf of Kerala State Council for Science, Technology and Environment, I extend a deep sense of gratitude to you, sir, for sharing so much of time with you. And I thank all the participants for having spent time. And special thanks to, I've seen two, Aparna and Jinsi Mariam Jacob, who have been, translating this for
nice,
some.
very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bye.
Yeah.